Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Good morning, everybody. This is normally where David Menzies introduces the show on behalf of me and him. But on Mondays going forward, it's going to be a very special sort of Prairie, Alberta edition of the Rebel News daily live stream. So it's me, your host, Sheila Gunn-Reid, and my good friend, Adam Sos, our Rebel News Calgary reporter. Adam, how you doing?
Wonderful. Happy to be here. Good morning. Good morning to everyone out there.
So this is the first time that Adam and I have ever done this together. So bear with us as we figure out who does what. You know, with David, it's sort of like David leads and then I follow. And it's just, you know, after that, it's an hour of us just sharing a conversation as friends. And the good news is that Adam and I are friends, too. We just don't know who does what on the new edition of the show. So I guess we'll start off by introducing the show and telling you that there may come a time where we have to sort of evacuate YouTube to the lifeboat of the other platforms. So this is the Rebel News daily live stream. Used to just be on Friday and just hosted by the big boss man Ezra Levant. But then the pandemic struck, and then all of us were grounded. We couldn't really travel the way we wanted to. And all of you were sort of stuck at home, too, as businesses closed and people panicked and sent all their employees home. AD, I'm getting a little bit of feedback in my ear. I don't know if that's you or me or, you know, like I said, there's going to be kinks today. It's still there. Okay, he's going to work. Oh, that's great. But now I can hear myself in my ear. Let's see. Okay, I'm good. I think I'm good. Anyway, so carrying on with what we're doing on the show today. So the show used to just be hosted on Friday, just hosted by Ezra, but then the pandemic struck. Everybody was sort of sent home, including us, because we couldn't travel to get the stories the way that we wanted to. But there was still lots of news, and it was changing very rapidly. So what better way to address the news of the day than to sit down with our friends, including our friends across the screen from us, and just talk about it as it happened. And at the time, it was a great way for our Rebel friends to support the work that we do here completely willingly, unlike what they make you do at the CBC. And we could take something called a super chat. But after Biden got elected, the crackdown on conservatives on social media platforms really kicked into high gear. It was happening before, of course, because the sitting president, as you know, was removed from Twitter. But after the election, things really started to happen, particularly on YouTube. And so they demonetized us. They took $400,000 right out of the center of our company. And they've introduced these onerous rules about things we can and cannot talk about. And one of those rules is that we cannot question the decisions of the local public health authorities because they are, I guess, deities that we cannot blaspheme against. So there will come a time here on Rebel News, if you're watching us on YouTube, where we will suggest that you disconnect from YouTube where we're streaming and join us on one of the other platforms where we are also simultaneously streaming. And those platforms are Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U. And all of those platforms, I don't know if they're conservative. I don't care if they're conservative. What's important to me is that they don't care that you are conservative, and they don't care that you're a climate change skeptic or a lockdown skeptic. They don't care. They just want you to come and enjoy the free and liberal exchange of ideas that we're entitled to in a civilized Western society. So now that I've got that all out of the way, Adam, what would you like to talk about? What's first?
Oh, there's so much to talk about. Well, as you very likely know, today in Alberta is an election day. Municipal elections taking place at cities across the province. But beyond that, we've also got a number of broader spanning issues, ultimately talking about equalization, daylight savings, and some Senate nominations. So there's a lot to dive into there as well. Of course, we've also got this Let's Go Brandon memo we could dive into. There's so much to talk about. What do you think we should go with first, Sheila?
Let's start off with the Alberta election, because I think Calgary is the place to watch here. It's the municipal elections, but also we've got some other ballot questions. We've got an equalization question that I was looking for quite the exact wording. And I think maybe if Mr. Producer can find it, Derek Fildebrandt tweeted out the exact wording. So Alberta is engaged in an equalization question today. We also have our Senate election today, which is something that the other provinces don't do, but it's unique to Alberta. It's a longstanding tradition where when we hold our municipal elections, instead of cracking open the Constitution and engaging in just the catastrophe that would be, we put our choices for Senate on the municipal ballot. Albertans choose who we want, and then the Prime Minister, if he's a good and decent human being that respects Alberta, appoints those people. However, we have Justin Trudeau. So we already have what's called a senator in waiting named Mike Shake. He was passed over so that of Edmonton Journal columnist named Paula Simons, who'd once railed against the unelected Senate and it sort of advocated for the abolishment of the Senate. She took that position. And then just before the federal election campaign, Justin Trudeau goes and appoints another Alberta senator, not again Mike Shake, pass him over. And then as we are about to choose our Senate candidates, Justin Trudeau just goes and supersedes us and elects one. So we've got that on the docket today. But I think we should touch on the Calgary candidates. There's really only one Conservative, isn't there, Adam?
Yeah, well, I mean, and really quickly, I don't know if Andrew pulled it up, but the terminology on that, I found it here, is really quickly, should Section 36(2) of the Constitution Act 1982, Parliament and the Government of Canada's commitment to the principle of making equalization payments be removed from the Constitution. We'll get back to that later as we talk about equalization. But yeah, Jeremy Farkas would be, there's two other candidates who are doing okay, and they might fall somewhere in the in-between, but this is ultimately, or looking like a two-horse race, and Jeremy Farkas is the Conservative voice in that race, or the Conservative option of the two. The other option, basically a union-backed, chosen by Nenshi to follow in his footsteps, candidate Jyoti Gondek, who very much on virtually every bill as a councillor voted yes, spend. So not someone that I think our viewers will certainly be voting for. But on the other side, we have Jeremy Farkas. His is a very interesting story. His father actually escaped from communist Hungary, I think, in the late 50s. And so he came here early, and it's interesting, my own father escaped from communist Hungary. And the tie-ins on his bio, he talked about learning how to work hard, Jeremy Farkas himself, at a shingle factory in Ogden in Calgary here, which is very likely ICO. Interestingly enough, the same shingle company we used to replace the roof for our repairthechurch.com campaign. But almost every Hungarian immigrant who came through Calgary, I think at some point or another, worked at ICO. So he's very much a working class immigrant kid who doesn't want to spend everyone's money and just wants to go hard to work for Calgarians. So he has a long history of voting no on spending, virtually universally. Someone actually attacked him outside of his campaign in chalk. They wrote the word no everywhere as though it was an attack on him. Many Conservatives viewed it as a glowing endorsement because he was against spending. So definitely a more fiscally prudent Conservative. There are certain projects that he is open to spending on to generate work and do some of that stuff, but very much against the $1 million and $1 billion spending budgets that city halls have come to corral within their power.
Yeah, he's been anti all the big spending stuff. He's sort of, and I remember he was very prominent in the decision to not host the Olympics. What a catastrophe that would have been. He's been an advocate for transparency and for opening up, quit holding these sort of in camera, as they call them, meetings of city council, because I think Calgary City Council meets in secret more than any other city council in Canada, and which is counter to the ethos of Calgary. It's a very conservative place, and Conservatives like to know what their politicians are doing and spending their money on. But a lot of the decisions happening in Calgary were happening behind closed doors, and Farkas has resisted that. And I noticed that Mayor Naheed Nenshi, the outgoing mayor, who thankfully is not running again, he's on his way out the door, he sort of took a snide comment at Farkas. I think knowing that the chances are that Farkas is going to win. Right now, I think the latest polling shows that, like you said, it's a two-horse race. Farkas is at 35%, while Gondek is at 34%, and Jeff Davison is a distant third with 14% of the vote. However, I do think some of those Davison votes are going to go to Farkas in the end.
Yeah. 100%. There was actually a strategic letter sent out by the Farkas campaign effectively saying what we risk here if those votes go in a different direction is, well, I mean, it's something we've heard throughout the elections, is this idea of a vote split. And we may wind up getting something we absolutely don't want, which is a high spending municipal government, if people are willing to vote that way. So certainly that is the hope, is that people will realize this. I think very much one of the other prominent candidates who decided not to run was Kent Hare. Obviously not a fan favorite probably around here, but when he decided to run, I was actually excited because he probably wasn't going to win, but he was going to take a lot of Giotti's seats, or a lot of her votes rather. So I was optimistic that when he dropped out, it was pretty self-evident that she'd get some of those votes back. But again, the hope that there won't be vote splitting and we will get something. But as you said, he voted no on the arena, voted no on the Olympics, voted no on all this ridiculous spending. There are some other initiatives that he is voting in favor of that simply to get us sort of on par with other world-class cities, like a link from the airport to downtown Calgary for business purposes. But the few things that he is willing to spend on, I think the general intention is clearly to generate revenue and generate business and get people back downtown. It's not just to be spending for the sake of public art or giving millionaires more money for their arenas. So certainly not completely averse to spending, but by every metric, a low spender compared to the other candidates.
Well, and I think, too, that if he does win, and it's looking like it's a 50-50 possibility here, maybe a 51-49 possibility that he could. I think it's a strong rebuke of everything that City Council in Calgary has done for at least the last 4 years, but probably closer to 8. He has been repeatedly sanctioned by everybody on council. They gang up on Farkas, and Farkas sort of just stands alone, votes no on things. But it shows that what Farkas was doing was in line with possibly the majority of Calgarians, and City Council was operating without a real mandate.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's super fitting. Farkas means wolf, so he's very much the lone wolf going to bat for Calgarians out in council there when everyone else is spending. And I mean, the one other sort of thing where he took a stance, and if there's any criticism, which as journalists we should levy criticism fairly as well. When Nenshi put forward, and this is a good thing, when Nenshi put forward the mandate overriding the restrictions exemption program that at least gave businesses an opportunity to opt out of vaccine passports, he was the only councillor who voted against that. So that's very good. He's the only one who said, listen, this should be a provincial thing. The municipal government shouldn't be overriding it. He wasn't endorsing the provincial program. He was saying this is confusing enough. Adding another layer in regionality to it just creates a whole mess. Now, when he was criticized heavily for that, his response was pretty typical of a politician. He's like, I'm not saying I'm anti this or I'm anti that, but he did offer that sort of not quite an apology, but saying that I'm not going all in and saying that this should all be shut down. He's just saying that this wasn't a good decision. But regardless, being the only person on that council, once again, who again voted no, that should have been his entire campaign. The guy who votes no, it's not an insult, it's an endorsement. Yeah.
Well, and with municipal elections coming to Alberta right now, I think it's important that Conservatives realize just how important municipal elections are. When you look at the patchwork quilt of ridiculous exemptions, ridiculous restrictions, it all happened at the municipal level by and large until such time as the province stepped in and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. So this is why, as Conservatives, we need to have people who care about civil liberties at the local level. And when we look at the ridiculous things that our kids are being taught, and we think, why are we losing the culture war? Because we're fighting it after the battle's already been won. if we are worried about what's being taught in school, has anybody ever reached out to their school board trustee? Because that's really the closest person that you can deal with. And that's where the decisions are being made. And that is also the person that you can easily remove. I mean, sometimes these school board trustee elections are like, 30, 40, 50 votes different. If parents can easily mobilize and out-mobilize a school board trustee campaign, if they're watchful, ready and waiting, and if they realize where the battle is happening, and it's happening 4 years before your kid gets taught something crazy at school.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's funny. That's almost, it's almost ironic how conservatism. It's all these major organized, well-funded campaigns talk about grassroots conservatism, and it's always on the federal or provincial level, and it's always these big meta, non-grassroots organizational structures. What we need to do is actually become grassroots activists or grassroots participants, at least in society, and get involved with those trustee nominations. Actually, I know so many people go and they're voting for their counselor. Well, guess what? One of those counselors may very well become mayor one day, and very often they transition into provincial politics after that. But the structure changes from the bottom up. So if you have a city council that is staunchly conservative, then the mayor is likely going to be conservative, or they won't be able to do much that's not conservative because they won't get any support. If you have two major cities, let's say in a province, that are staunchly conservative, that will shape the culture, and you will have that echoed by the provincial governments and so on. So it needs to be a two-pronged approach. We can't just worry about federal and provincial politics and then forget about the rest, because it's very much built up from the ground.
Yes. And while things are looking hopeful in Calgary, good for you, Edmonton. Now, I don't live in Edmonton, but as it turns out, I live in one of the counties that butts up against it. So whatever Edmonton's Liberal NDP, or actually Green mayor, does there, the bedroom communities just sort of follow. And then as a resident, you're like, but I didn't vote for that guy, so why am I getting his policies? So Edmonton, they have one good conservative on the ballot there, but he is polling a distant second. So Mike Nickel, he's been campaigning for the longest time. He's questioned foreign funding in Edmonton municipal politics because, as you know, these large American foundations also dump money into large municipalities to adopt green agendas. He's been working, for the better part of 18 months. He's been out there trying to spread the good news of conservatism, evangelize the good news. And I don't know if Edmonton voters are listening. Now, that's a little bit different than Calgary because Edmonton is a government town. It's where the seat of government is. There's a lot of public sector union workers there. And unfortunately, it looks as though tonight Edmonton is going to elect a failed Liberal politician named Amarjeet Sohi, who barely snuck in 2015 past Tim Uppal in Edmonton Mill Woods to become the Liberal MP there. He was unelected in the following election. And so with Liberal candidates, they tend to fail upwards and down. And it looks like he's going to be the mayor of Edmonton. And so despite all of Justin Trudeau's baggage that should be hung around Amarjeet Sohi's neck like a millstone, looks like the good people of Edmonton are going to send this guy to the mayor's office. God help us all, because I live in a bedroom community. So whatever Amarjeet Sohi says, my mayor will adopt, because my mayoral choices are not good either.
That's too bad. Well, they're either going to become a judge or a mayor, so one of those two fates was inevitably going to befall them. And it's I think it's shocking for people outside of Alberta. Likely, when you see election results, you can figure this out. But Alberta is still very much despite an NDP government having been elected, Alberta is still the most conservative place probably in this country. And yet, Edmonton, the capital, the heart of government within this province, is still overwhelming, or at least in part, some of the areas they're Liberal. It's a bizarre sort of hole in the middle. It's the opposite of Oasis, in the middle of an otherwise strong and free Alberta.
Yeah, I call it District 9. Just build a fence around it to trap everybody in there, because it's like culturally incompatible with the rest of the province. Yeah, I mean, they elect NDP MPs, they elect Liberal MPs. They've got a series of, like, the last mayor, Don Iveson, he was further left than the NDP. He was like a Green Party mayor. Amarjeet, so he comes from the more progressive wing of the Liberal Party, so he could easily just slide right in to the NDP. That's what Edmonton is going to elect. And then they're all going to wonder why their property taxes are so high and why the bike lanes are cleared before the streets are in one of the most northern populous cities on the face of the earth. It's very, very strange.
Well, and you're not directly in Edmonton, but I don't know if you can speak to this. Personally, my property taxes have gone up, and all they've done is they clear the roads less. They take my garbage half as often, which is great when you've got a bunch of kids. But like all I'm seeing is increased spending. But then it's not as though like, well, I'm paying more taxes, but I'm getting all these services. They're gutting services and increasing spending. Is it the same situation in Edmonton?
Yeah, it is the same situation in Edmonton. They had, for the last, I don't know, 8 years, they've had this push to put in bike lanes, and it's Edmonton. You can use them 4 months of the year, maybe 4, maybe 5, and they clear the bike lanes first. And for me, like I said, I live in a bedroom community that sort of butts up, and I don't live in the community, but I live in the county. And everyone in these bedroom communities, that's why it's so important what happens in Edmonton, is because your mayor is like, oh, the big city mayors are doing it, I got to do it too. And so it goes. And in where I live, Strathcona County, my choices are awful. I've got the former NDP MLA running for mayor. I've got Dave Quest, the Bedford apologist, who, for some reason, his dog is on his campaign photo, and I'll vote for the dog before I vote for Dave Quest.
I've seen that dog. I'd vote for that dog.
I know, he looks good. And I've got Rod Frank, who also is a failed Liberal Party candidate. He's the current mayor. He lost to Garnet Jennings out here. And so, again, Liberal Party candidates, they fail upwards or down, and he ran for the mayor and won. And so that's what I've got. I have a long shot anti-lockdown mayoral candidate running, but it's a long shot. So here we are. But in other parts of the world, or at least in the province, I'm kind of hopeful, because Ty Northcott, the pro-rodeo legend, anti-lockdown rodeo organizer, he's running for the mayor in Bowden, and his chances look decent. And then there's Glenn Carrott in Innisfail. He's anti-lockdown. He's behind United We Roll. He's been out campaigning for probably the better part of a year. He's a Fight the Fines client. Yeah, there's me at the rodeo with Ty Northcott. And then, Glenn Carrott in Innisfail, he's a Fight the Fines client because someone called the cops on the Easter Bunny when he was holding a campaign event outside, and he ended up with a lockdown ticket. So, we know that likely came from the opposing mayoral campaign using the police as a weapon to silence political dissent. But good luck to those guys, because it shows that you can get elected on an anti-lockdown platform if they do get elected.
Well, and you might be, as you say that, I was going to say it's not all bad news in north of Calgary, and you might be onto something with that District 9 idea, because I'd take either of those guys as mayor of Calgary any day of the week, certainly. So there is some hope out there for sure. Maybe now, if you want, should we hop into some of those broader sort of election issues, some of the bigger questions, maybe talk about Senate, or do you want to do some super chats?
Let's go to the equalization issue first before we go take some chats. And again, if people, I don't know if I said this because I don't have David holding my hand here. I hope David's not listening, because this will go straight to his head. But he's very good at directing the direction of the show, and I'm good at following. But if you would like to support the work that we do here at Rebel News, you can support us a couple different ways, actually 3, 4, 5 different ways. You can leave us a tip on Rumble, Odyssey, or Super U. You can tip us as a creator there. You can leave a Rumble rant. And on Odyssey, there's a bunch of different ways that you can support us. If you don't want to use regular old fiat currency, you can use a cryptocurrency. You can buy some of their library cryptocurrency and then donate it to us in the form of a hyper chat or also a tip as a creator. So if you'd like to support the work that we do, now's your chance. because we're never going to let Justin Trudeau reach into your pocket and then give us your money. We'd like you to do it of your own free will. Fancy that. Anyways, let's get into the equalization stuff.
For sure. So, I mean,
go ahead.
I can start. Yeah. So the thing that really struck me about this, and it's a conversation that I just happened to have last week, talking to Maxime Bernier about this, and he was talking. He laid out just how unfair it is. The way that equalization is structured. This was just one example he gave. So Alberta Oil and energy is included in the sort of funds that go into that equalization calculation. On the other hand, because it qualifies as renewable, in Quebec, they've got a ton of hydroelectricity, so they are making a ton of money. But all of that money that they make that is filling pockets to almost to the same extent in many ways as Alberta Oil is here in Alberta, that's exempt because it's renewable. So the entire equalization structure is effectively, and you've all likely seen this cartoon, I don't know if Andrew can pull it up, but it's the workhorse of the province, and it's all just being, there's the cash cow, and it's being fed here in Alberta, and then that money is just winding up on the east. And we've seen time and time again, when Alberta's in trouble or Alberta needs help, it doesn't seem to come the other way. So certainly I think it's a universal sentiment among most Albertans anyways, that it's time for a change on that front.
Do you have the exact wording of that equalization question?
Yeah, I'll pull it up again right here. I don't know.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I do momentarily. Yeah. Sure. I don't know if Andrew managed to pull it up. So yeah, here it is. Sorry, bear with me. So it's a yes/no question. Should section, and it's extremely bizarrely phrased, but it says, should section 36(2) of the Constitution Act 1982 Parliament and the Government of Canada's commitment to the principle of making equalization payments be removed from the Constitution? Yes or no? So basically the phrasing is, should we remove this 1982 constitutional commitment to equalization payments from the Constitution? And it's a yes/no question. So yes would be equalization needs to change. We need reform right now. So that would be a yes. And no would be, let's keep it as it currently stands. For anyone out there wondering when they're voting, yes means change equalization.
And, as Albertans, it has been unfair to us because, as you rightly point out, this is a non-renewable resource. It's not even supposed to be included in the equalization formula calculation. And yet it always is, because we generate so much wealth by developing our non-renewable resources that the other provinces or the federal government wants a piece of the pie so that they can sprinkle it out to the other provinces. But this only occurs with Alberta and I think with Saskatchewan. However, it's not included in the formula when you look at the other provinces. So it acts as a disincentive for places like New Brunswick to develop their natural gas resources, because New Brunswick is sitting on a ton of natural gas. But instead of safely fracking the way we do in Alberta, please don't bring up the fracking debate with me. If fracking were a catastrophe, then Alberta would be a wasteland, but it is a beautiful place to live, work, and play. But in New Brunswick, they're sitting on a ton of natural gas, but they don't have to develop those resources. And why would they? Because if they do, then they are sort of things are taken out of the equalization calculation for them. So why develop your gas resources, especially when it's a political hot potato, because American money has flowed in there to sort of taint the public's perception of fracking and what it is and the jobs it creates and how safely it's done. So why would any government deal with that political hot potato when they can just take fracking money from Alberta? Let the Albertans frack and deal with it, and we don't have to.
And as you said, these are not renewable resources. They will eventually run out. So if you're sitting on a wealth of resources, another province is pumping themselves dry, running out of that resource, not anytime soon, but eventually, why would you tap into your own resources as well? Once Alberta is out hundreds of years down the line, you then have those resources. The other thing too is this is that kind of standard sort of communist socialist pitfall, where if you're sitting on a massive savings account, let's say, and as long as you don't withdraw so much money a month, you're getting a big check from another province. Why would you withdraw your own funds? So they're incentivized not to develop. they're incentivized to keep it low. Meanwhile, on the other hand, we've got the government actively intervening in us getting pipelines to these places, so we can't even sell them the resources. So they're attacking us on two fronts. What we do sell, they're taking money off the top and giving it to other provinces. And what we're trying to sell, they're limiting our capacity to do so. So it's a two-pronged attack.
I think this is my favorite outcome of equalization, because it's right in your face. Quebec has tabled a series of balanced budgets. So Quebec, one of the largest recipients of equalization dollars directly out of the pockets of struggling Albertans, and Quebec, the province that blocks pipelines. And even so much as like the big city mayors there will block a pipeline. They are tabling balanced budget after balanced budget after balanced budget on the backs of Albertans while not developing their natural resources, while doing all that they can to prevent Albertans from developing their natural resources, while Albertans just spiral into out of control debt. That's, I think, the real problem that normal people have with equalization is that Alberta is spiraling into debt. We are generating this wealth, and other people are balancing their budgets on the backs of us.
And something that speaks to that further, I think it was Norway, but I could be wrong. But there was a country with heavy, So they've got this massive, basically a fund, like a historical fund or an equity fund, where they have all this money put away from resources for the future of the country. And everyone criticizes Alberta Oil because we haven't done that. Well, if we took the amount of money that we've been pumping into equalization year after year, we would have a massive heritage fund instead of an emptied heritage fund. So people are using that example where they're not dumping their entire economy into an equalization program with the European Union. They're sitting on their money. Whereas us, we are placed in a situation where the second we get anything in that account, the second we do well, it goes to equalization and makes the rest of the country rich.
Right. It's called the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and it's sitting at $1.4 trillion. And a lot of Norway's offshore North Sea oil and gas development goes into that for the benefit of Norwegians. Whereas if Alberta were able to do that, keep our wealth here, benefiting the people who are generating it, we would have something similar. But instead, I guess our sovereign fund is the good people of Eastern Canada who failed to develop their own resources because they exist in a system that disincentivizes it.
And I think on the other hand of this, really quickly, I think that most Albertans are in favor of helping their neighbor. I think that's something inherently Albertan. So I think there's lots of Albertans out there who are like, well, if people are hurting, we should help them. But this has become so politicized that it isn't about that anymore. And when we're hurting, we then ask our neighbors to help us out back. That's how Alberta works. That's why Alberta's strong, is we help each other. Well, equalization is set up so that you empty your pantry, and then when you need help, there's no one there, and you're on your own.
Well, yeah, and again, if it were only about that, but it's not, when you see places like Quebec with luxurious daycare programs and built on the backs of Alberta moms who have to go to work because they can't afford not to. And in Quebec, they're getting $7 a day daycare, whatever it is now. It used to be $7 when it was really sticking in my craw. But I guess inflation affects everything. And so that's the problem. If it were only about helping a depressed province, but it's not that anymore. It's about luxurious social programs somewhere else. And Albertans, not only do we not want those programs because we think they're expensive, we want those provinces. If you want those things, get those things, but go to work and pay for them.
Yeah.
And I noticed that outgoing Mayor Naheed Nenshi, of course, because he's just awful. He doesn't want Albertans to vote yes for equalization reform. He wants everybody to vote no.
Of course not. Yeah.
Of course.
Well, and it's sorry to get back to this, but I mean, like talking about this, the amount of government and large union loans or donations his favored candidate, Jyoti Gondek, had received, I think it was $1.7 million. They attacked Jeremy Farkas for releasing that information publicly, but then they've gone on a bunch of political tirades. So everything they're accusing him of, they're doing themselves. It's absolutely ridiculous. But that's the conversation we already had.
Now, maybe we can get to the other thing that's on the ballot. That's the Senate. We sort of touched on that, but you ran out to talk to some local Senate candidates that are sort of local to you. So why don't you key up that video, and maybe, Mr. Producer, we can throw to it after after Adam sets it up.
No worries. I know Andrew, Adam, lots of A's in the studio.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So. Yeah, we ran out, we met up with Maxime Bernier, and there are 3 PPC candidates here in Alberta who've been nominated. And for those who don't know, right now there's 1 vacancy in the Senate, but someone's set to retire within October. It may be happening today, but so there will be 2 seats. When you go to the ballot, you're going to be able to pick up to 3 Senate candidates. So 3 Senate candidate choices. 2 of those, hopefully, and Justin Trudeau willing, will become senators for Alberta. So we went out and we met with 2 of those candidates from the PPC, as well as Maxime Bernier. So I don't know if Andrew's got that video ready to go.
There's no audio, Andrew.
Sure. While we're getting that queued up. So basically with this, for those who don't know, we can just talk about how Senate's structured effectively. So parties can nominate people who will be associated with their parties and therefore echo some of their views. But one of the benefits to the Senate with regards to regional representation is they aren't subject to the same amount of sort of party rule. So there isn't a party whip sort of keeping them in line, and they don't have to vote in sync. So if there's a senator for Alberta, let's say, and Aaron O'Toole and the Conservative Party of Canada form the government, but they're only interested in votes out east, so they're willing to vote against energy and to vote all these green policies, and that hurts us. Okay, we've got audio. We'll jump to that now.
Great.
To support these 3 candidates who will bring a different voice from Alberta in Ottawa. And I'm urging the Prime Minister to name the next senator from Alberta from among those who will be chosen by Albertans in this election.
So cities across Alberta are off to the polls again, and one of the decisions they have to make is a Senate election decision. They will have an opportunity to name up to 3 names, and I've got 2 people who are on that list representing the People's Party of Canada. If you could first introduce yourselves. I suppose many of these folks probably know you from our election coverage, but if you could introduce yourself anyways.
Sure, Nadine Waltwood, and I was People's Party of Canada candidate for Banff Airdrie in 2021 and 2019. And of course, my name is on the ballot for the Senate candidate here in Alberta.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and my name is Kelly Lorenz, and I was the 2021 candidate for Red Deer Mountain View, and I was the 2019 candidate for the PPC in Calgary Nose Hill.
Wonderful. So I suppose first off, we can get into, in a fundamental way, what the role of the Senate is. I think we know it's kind of a sober second thought, as John A. MacDonald put it, but in practical terms, what does the Senate do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think that sober second thought to legislation. I think it is really, truly, I mean, it is the upper house, 105 senators, but its primary role should be, I think, more of an investigative body to make sure that legislation and to hold government accountable. That's really what I would like to see it as being, more than just a second sober thought and a rubber stamp, but more a place where questions can be, the hard questions can be asked from more of a nonpartisan standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And what does the election process, I know it looks different from province to province. Often it's just a nomination, but here in Alberta we do have an opportunity to actually put forward names for nomination. So what does the general process look like for becoming a senator?
The process is pretty much the same, really. You put your application in, and we have support with Maxime, which is great. And it gives us an opportunity to speak to Albertans right across the province, and that's the biggest difference that I find. I have the opportunity to travel, talk to Albertans, and really get to hear what they have to say and be able to represent them in the Senate.
One of the interesting things on that is Alberta is the only province that chooses to elect its Senate's candidates. So, I see what Alberta is doing right now as its own little rebellion. And it's not just today. We've been doing this. We had an election in 2012 and further back. But it is a way of saying, hey, let's make it relevant. And Alberta is really setting an example. I hope that other provinces would actually take the opportunity to follow our lead. And let's make it more of a democratic process as opposed to an appointment, which so many people in Canada see as really just a cushy place for a lot of maybe career politicians to kind of hang on the taxpayers' dollar for maybe a little too long.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah, so really quickly, I just wanted to touch on that. One of the things we got into next, and as Nadine mentioned, was that it's very much more of a democratic process is what Albertans are seeking when they elect Senate. So I think on lots of these issues, whether it be the daylight savings question, the equalization question, whether our senators are in fact the senators that are elected, is whether or not Eastern Canada, whether or not Justin Trudeau will respect the mandates of Albertans. When we say these are the senators that we want, will Justin Trudeau acknowledge that, or will we put in another failed Liberal candidate or someone who's on side with his values? It's a litmus test for whether or not we have that respect from Justin Trudeau. Same thing, the vote on equalization is not binding, but what it does do is it says that Albertans have laid out a clear mandate, and it gives our provincial government a little bit more authority to say, no, this is something that we absolutely demand from the federal government. So long term, we'll see how it plays out, but the hope is with this new mandate for Western values, Western senators, that Justin Trudeau will actually acknowledge and respect that vote of the people.
I love your optimism, Adam, but I don't share it whatsoever.
I'm not optimistic. I'm just saying I hope.
Just given how Justin Trudeau appointed a senator for Alberta right before we were set to choose a senator for Alberta, I think that sent a strong message that no matter what we do, he's going to ignore it. But it is good to have our values and our wishes properly polled and demonstrated. And I think that's why the Senate election is so important, and the equalization question is so important, that everybody should just get out there and vote.
For the people out there who are sick and tired of it, and they're just saying that Justin Trudeau doesn't care about Alberta, and that Alberta needs to separate, or Alberta needs to make more demands. If Justin Trudeau on every one of these fronts rejects us, that is further ammunition for that movement.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Get out there and you can say, look, we did everything we could within the confines of Confederation to have our voices heard. Just nobody was listening. That's a pretty reasonable argument. Now, I think we should go quickly because it is in the title of the YouTube description. So let's get to it while we are still safely on YouTube. The Government of Canada says that no workers whatsoever within the federal, I suppose, civil service can use the wording "Let's Go Brandon." And before I get into this, we want to preface this. We've seen a letter. We've reached out to the federal government for clarification and confirmation. So just know that as we're talking about this, we don't know for sure if this is accurate or true. But based on everything we know about Justin Trudeau's federal government, I would not be surprised. It's easy to not be skeptical about this letter, knowing what we know about the federal government. So the letter that we've seen says, "Good day. This is a formal notification that all government correspondence must be professional in nature and approved by department heads. When applicable, all correspondence must be vetted by the PMO." So that's the Prime Minister's Office for Framing and Message prior to public disclosure or internal distribution. Further, and then it's blacked out, "Signature block salutations must be approved messaging and provided in bilingual format as designated by the regional guidelines." So it sounds like somebody is putting "Let's Go Brandon" in their YouTubes or in their email sign off. So 1A, the use of colloquialism or sayings with the intended double meaning or offense are strictly prohibited in all means of correspondence and or communication. Specifically, the use of the wording "Let's Go Brandon" or any variation thereof under any circumstances is banned by the Canadian Public Service. I think this is pretty funny because I suppose this is going to purge all the Wheat Kings supporters from the federal civil service. I can't believe that they had to send this letter, but I kind of think that's fun. It gives me hope for some of those people grinding against the gears of the greater government inside the civil service, that there are still normals in there who have a sense of humor.
And I think Andrew actually has, for those unfamiliar with, I'm sure most of you probably know what the Let's Go Brandon thing is all about, but Andrew, just in my ear, says that we have the clip ready, so should we just run that quickly for those unfamiliar?
Yeah. Let's run it, but just be aware that there's a harsh word in here. If you, we're not going to church it up for you, unfortunately. There is a harsh word here, and let's roll it.
Thank you to all of our partners. Oh my God, it's just such an unbelievable moment.
Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd, let's go, Brandon. Brandon, you told me you were going to kind of hang back those first two stages and just watch and learn. What did you learn that helped you there in those closing laps?
Oh my God, it was learning how each line didn't stay to one, and everything shifted top to bottom so much.
Let's go, Brandon! 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 East Germany!
You can't put in Thatcher
That's great. So just for context, just for context. So it was spawned when I think that girl was an NBC reporter. Brandon Brown had just won at Talladega for the NASCAR watchers out there. So he had just won Talladega. The crowd is shouting F Joe Biden. The girl from NBC, who I don't know if she is not very smart, hard of hearing, or just running cover for Joe Biden, was like, listen to the crowd. They're shouting, let's go, Brandon. But it's like, no, they're shouting F Joe Biden, which is one of the reasons why I like NASCAR and rodeo, is because they don't do this whole PC business. But anyways, it has become a meme that now it's instead of saying F Joe Biden, people are holding up signs that say let's go Brandon, and everybody knows what it means. And obviously somebody in the civil service is signing off on their emails using that. And we just got, I see, a response to Efron, because we did reach out to the federal public service to find out what if this is something. And it says, hello, Efron, thank you for your note. We're looking into this. Would you happen to have an unredacted copy of the letter? No, you guys have the unredacted copy of the letter.
That's them saying, who leaked this to you?
Yes. And then look at this. Can you also let us know what outlet you're writing for? Why? You're not going to give us that information? They're not going to give us that information if we tell them that we are from Rebel News. It shouldn't matter. If a media outlet is requesting information and clarification, you're supposed to give it. You're not supposed to screen the media outlets before you give them the information that it's their job to obtain, and it's your job to give it to them. What a bunch of
and I think the funniest thing about all this is like the whole notion of a meme. It's the Streisand effect, which for those who don't know, Barbara Streisand, when preaching about all this environmental and economic soundness, had this giant palatial mansion, which she went out of her way to cover up. And what ended up happening is it drew a lot of attention to it. It's called the Streisand effect. It's when you're trying to mask something, and that ends up being the story. So with the F Joe Biden chant, them saying, "Let's go Brandon," the meme was generated when they tried to cover that up. It's as though the government of Canada is not aware of this whatsoever, because if anything, an official government memo saying no one can say "Let's go Brandon," what it's going to do is cement permanently "Let's go Brandon" into the Canadian meme dictionary. Like, they've just ramped it up to the next level. It is now a government of Canada approved meme.
Yeah. Now that the government of Canada has responded, I'm forced to do this. Like when the government of Canada tells me not to do something, that's usually when I'm like, well, I wasn't going to do it, but now I'm probably gonna. By the way, Mr. Producer points this out to us. The person from the, I think this is the Shared Services, is that what it is? Which is basically the Federal Public Service Media Department. His name is Denis Schreibert. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. But my good Lord, look at all these pronouns. He, him, his, and then we get into the French versions. Il, lui, son. So not only do they give their pronouns in English, but also in French. This is too much. It's so perfect. He's the media relations and issues management, public affairs, corporate communications in the strategic and engagement branch of Shared Services Canada. Denis Schreibert. He, him.
I wonder what his friends call him. That Il lui song sounds like LA song. It's like a church hymn. He, him, his, Il song. Anyways, that's a mouthful.
It's too much. Like, the guy's name is Dennis. Sorry, but we know you're a dude. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Can you also let us know what outlet you are writing for, Dennis, with 6 pronouns?
As if they don't know. They knew immediately.
I know. There's not a lot of Efrons out there in media. But anyway, we should get to some of these super chats because we have 10 minutes left in the show and they're kind of piling up. And I want to... Okay, perfect. Let's get to them. I'll read them. Maybe you want to react, I think. Okay, so perfect. Chats. We've got one from Kane and Mark. $3 says... As someone in the airlines industry, the easiest way to protest in Calgary is at the intersection at the YYC airport. If 20 or 50 people cut off access to the airport for 30 to 40 minutes, we'll put the Canadian air traffic into chaos for hours of the day. And then Kane also notes that the intersection is not on airport grounds. I'm not for blocking the streets. I don't know. I don't like it when Greenpeace does it. I don't like it when Extinction Rebellion does it. I don't like any of that. And I think that blocking critical infrastructure is a big, big, big crime these days. And I don't want our legitimate protesters being accused of blocking critical infrastructure. For example, Adam, you've covered several protests where the media and politicians have said, oh, they're blocking the hospital. Yeah. People can't get into the hospital, and they're totally across the street. So they already lie about what you're doing. Don't do that which they say you're doing, I guess, is my advice.
And don't allow them, going back to the hospital thing, don't allow them to vilify, be above board. So when they try and make you look bad, they just look ridiculous. All those media pundits who vilified the people outside the protest, who got out of people's way, never blocked a road, were completely on their best behavior. They didn't say a word when Antifa blocked the road off with a big tarp and were blaring loud dubstep music. They all went silent. So they didn't criticize people who were on their side when they were actually interrupting hospital proceedings. But when people who are protesting for freedom are there and following the rules and making sure to stay away off the property, they'll vilify them. So you certainly want to be careful to not fall into the traps that these critics have set for people.
And I think that's sort of our approach to when we attend these sorts of protests, when there's antis there. I know, Adam, you approach them with kindness. You are never confrontational. You don't agitate them. You don't need to. They are confrontational and agitated by nature. I try not to be that which they say I am. They say that I'm rude. They say that I'm confrontational. They say that I'm short-tempered. I'm really none of those things when you meet me out in the real world. That's just the boogeyman that they've created of me in their head. And so I don't like to be that person. And I think it's important for our protest movements not to be that which the media and the left and the censors say that you are, because the second you do those things, they are going to come down on you. They are going to put new rules in place. They're going to do it even if you don't. So just don't give them the fuel for the fire.
And we've seen at the Calgary protests, the organizers and the MCs for this event, if, for example, there was someone standing by a train platform at the other one, they were wearing a mask, someone was barking at them to take off their mask, the MC immediately said, that's not what we're about. If you want to do this should be a free country. If you want to do that, good. What we're saying is don't push it on us. So the event organizers, the protesters, we don't want to let a few bad eggs create a bad image for the entire movement, who is about freedom, not about making other people comply with what they want.
Yeah, that's true. These are not anti-mask protests. They're not anti-vaccination protests. They are anti-coercion protests. That's really what they are. Okay. We've got another chat from Mike G1012, gives us $10. Very generous, Mike. Thank you. I'm from Quebec, and I agree with you. Considering our resources, there's no reasons to be on the receiving hand year after year. Thank you. You know what I think? I think most Quebecers feel that way, especially out of the major municipalities. I'm always very careful to not paint normal Quebecers with the broad brush that I paint their government with, because, Albertans, likewise, we're normal conservative people, and our government is not all that conservative. So I think Quebecers are often the first victims of their own government. I'm sure that they would love high-paying resource jobs that we have out here in Alberta. You guys would probably really enjoy them. However, your government just won't let you have them.
Well, and that's the funny thing is despite the language gaps, there are a striking amount of similarities. Like the people of Quebec with their separatist movement were saying, we're not being treated fairly, enough is enough, we're making these demands. Yeah. When you talk to these people, they're saying Alberta should do the same bloody thing. So very much, and Maxime Bernier calls himself a Quebecer or the Albertan from Quebec. But I think more and more people from Quebec would see eye to eye and be friends. And our friend who just made that comment, Mike, certainly is a proponent of that same mentality.
Yeah, I have greater appreciation for Quebecers than I've ever had. I think that they caught on to the fact that the Laurentian elite were treating them poorly, and actually tried to do something about it long before Albertans ever did. So they are kind of early adopters of good ideas. Kane Enmark also gives us $1 and says, let's go Brandon. Kevin Tennant gives us $5. You know what? We've made it this far, and I worry that this is going to put us off of YouTube. So should we say goodbye to YouTube this late in the show?
I think we have to make a point.
Yeah, we do. So we got to say,
we do.
You know what, Kevin? I want to read your chat on air. I just can't do it on YouTube. And I know, Kevin, that you are a regular donor, you're a regular viewer, and